going on, listeners? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It FC, your number one podcast for all things Black history. This is your host, as always, Elliot Barr, and is joining me is the two fantastic men, the guys that have the longest running Black-owned soccer podcast. I got to make sure I get it right. The host of We Made It is Steve Bam. How are you guys doing?
Chilling, doing great, man. Happy to be here.
Doing good, nice and warm out here.
You guys are out on the West Coast, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Are you guys in the same city, or are you guys like?
We're both in LA County, but in different cities.
Yeah.
Different cities. Okay. So I want to ask you guys first, like, how did We Made It get started? Like, where did this all get started from?
Well, I would let Caesar do that, but his memory isn't so great. I actually remember these things. To make it not super long, Caesar was in school in Hawaii, and we used to just talk on the phone for hours about soccer. Just like we're both watching matches, we're both like watching different stuff in the media, and we would get so frustrated with soccer media that when he came back, we were like, okay, like why don't we start our own podcast? And we had never done it before. We had never even really listened. I don't think I'd listened to a soccer podcast at that point. But that was May 2017. We're like, okay, I had some software. We got a mic, and we were just like, okay, let's just give it a try. And ever since then, we were just kept rocking.
Yeah, it was like it was one of those things where it's like we just always would just even dating back before then, like when I went to the World Cup in 2014, and we would just spend hours talking about just the game and like the intricacies of the game, and we'd actually talk about soccer and talk about how, let's say, the NFL Network would just do such good analysis on some of their shows of players, situations, gameplay, strategy, and then when we watch soccer, we just felt like some of that was lacking from our perspective, our side of the culture and the sport. And we're like, that'd be kind of cool to come up with something or start up something ourselves. So, and here we are.
So, now we made it to Can I Kick It podcast. So we really
let's go.
Look, I'm not that hyped up, but I just want to backtrack real quick. See, you were in school in Hawaii?
Yeah, man. I went to UH, man. Oof, I definitely miss it.
So I gotta ask, were you around there for what year you went to UH? I'm trying to remember.
I went from 2015 to 2017.
Oh, okay. So you were there when there was trash. I thought you were there when like they were in the Sugar Bowl run and all that stuff.
It was definitely. I'll tell you this: Hawaii's football was so bad at the time that we used to go to the pregame, then leave to come back to campus after. We used to take that bus to pregame, turn up, and then leave. And they would beg us to come inside the stadium. It was rough.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's not good at all. Well, the reason why I have you guys on, not only because you guys are a great Black soccer podcast, but you guys recently tweeted out the use of slave terminology within soccer. It is something that, unless you're really thinking about it, you're never going to really pay attention to. And this is a very important topic. So let's go ahead and let's dive into it. What is it about the terminology within soccer that has its roots within slavery?
Man, okay. I started watching soccer like really hardcore, like 2014. But before that, I would like some of my friends were into soccer and stuff like that. And I would just like talk to them about it, watch random games here and there. But I remember the first time my friend was like, oh yeah, like Juve's thinking about buying this player. I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, they're gonna like buying such and such. I'm like, hey man, like I don't like that. And but I wasn't really into soccer then. But by the time I got into soccer, I just realized like that's just kind of what you say. But it never really sat right with me. Like no matter what, I still like cringe a little bit whenever I like hear it or even say it myself. I think it was last year, June. We had an episode, Stop Calling Players Property. And this was like like in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protest last year. And even after that, like we would still say it because it's just such ingrained terminology to say buying and selling players. But then I think that was last week. I was like, you know what? Like we really got to stop. Like if something can happen and this could change, like we could start the changing of that terminology, that would be great. Because really all these like there's no excuse. The whole world had something to do with either the Atlantic slave trade or like the slave trade that was coming from the Middle East. Like everybody knows about this. Everybody knows that like slavery is a real thing. Even if you don't know about that, you know about the Romans or something. You know that, I mean, let's be honest, like it still happens today. We have like, sadly, we still have slavery in a lot of ways. But I think that in real life outside of soccer, like nobody would feel comfortable saying buying and selling such and such name. So it's weird that in soccer, like it's just accepted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I think we're like, as we kind of been noticing the last few years, there's been a lot of movements and culture made in terms of in the cultures to start, watching how old terminology for things we're saying needs to be changed, how we're addressing people, how we're giving respect to people that we previously weren't in the past. And I think that doesn't go, that needs to happen in this sport as well. And I think the biggest way you can make that change is to recognize that you've been doing it, it's ingrained in you, and that you want to make an effort towards it. Because honestly, even before we did this, we would still make that distinction. We'd still think about that. We'd be like, man, like, oh God, I hate seeing that, or I hate saying that. And that's important. It's important to do something about it. So, honestly, Bam brought it up to me and was like, you know what, like let's do some, let's stop using that. Let's make that a stance. And I was like, honestly, like, yeah, like I'm absolutely for that. Because, and I think the important part of the tweet also as well is that he said that, we're going to be making an effort towards getting that out of our language in general. And that the effort's important, the effort towards it, and, I'm happy. As in the past, we're taking a stance on this, and we've taken stances on things in the past as well. And we're going to continue to do so.
Caesar is more passionate about this because he's from a country that abolished slavery in 1888. So, they had 23 years more of slavery in Brazil. So he's just, he's a little bit more passionate. I'm kind of joking. I'm sorry.
No, and he's right. I mean, we know the history of how things have gone down. We know how Brazil, of course, was 23 years later than the United States, how Brazil had significantly more slaves even than the United States did. And we know how, even with transfers in the sport, how it's affected in different regions and how the treatment of players are. So it's something I feel like it's been kind of in there. It's been looming. It's if we're going to have a discussion and do all these banners and say no to racism, let's start at the root of things, which a lot of the root of it comes from terminology, how you address people, how you talk about people, and how you address these professionals in the sport.
I just want to say I'm so impressed by y'all two right now. Like, I don't know why I haven't had y'all two on earlier. But no, there's two things I want to pick up on, and I'll try to fix this question in a way. The first one, but when it comes to terminology within the sport, you're right. It's something that is ingrained in us. It's something that you don't think about inherently, but then when you sit back and you really think about it, you're like, I'm really saying that like Corporation A is buying player A for this amount of money, and this team is getting like, it's weird. But then when you dive a little bit deeper into it, and it wasn't until I started doing this podcast, so let me just start off. Like, the way how I got into soccer wasn't like watching a game or anything like that. Like, it was just one day my college roommate, he was from the Netherlands. I went to HBCU, and he was from the Netherlands, and he had like the Ajax flag. And I was like, yo, what is that? He was like, oh, that's Ajax. So one day I got on Wikipedia, started reading it up, and I started, how you get on Wikipedia, one thing leads to another. One thing leads to another.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So that's how it started for me. And then, but in doing that, you also read about some of these crazy transfers. How, like, I can't remember the player's name, but he was from Brazil. But he was sold to, I think, Norwich or some team in England for like $4 million. But out of that $4 million, he didn't see a penny of it, and he was just sold as like just property. And when you sit back and really think about it, you're like, damn, like that is insane, Because the other, like, you're right, see, you were making a point about how in this world we talk about buying and selling. In sports here in America, is more of, well, player A is traded for player B, vice versa. And the terminology is like different. But I want to ask. Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I think a great point is today. The big news today was Carmelo Anthony signs with the Los Angeles Lakers. It wasn't, the Los Angeles Lakers have purchased Carmelo Anthony. They haven't bought Carmelo Anthony. Right? It doesn't feel right, and it isn't right. And even if it was a Carmelo, if it was someone else like who isn't even a black athlete, it's still wrong. It's wrong to talk about humans like this because, as we know in history, slavery goes beyond one race. It's people around the world from all different regions and backgrounds. So it's needed. It's a terminology that's not here in the United States, and it doesn't need to be, especially how we've been seeing with soccer in Europe. It definitely doesn't need to be used over there. Absolutely, like you cannot be saying that.
No, not at all. I mean, this might be the one thing U.S. soccer has gotten right when it comes to European soccer. Maybe one of the few times. But I want to ask you guys this question: what if for people that are looking to change their terminology and looking to say, get rid of buy, sell, purchase? Do you have any alternatives for them to say? I know you mentioned like player A signs with the team A, but are there any other examples you guys have?
It's funny because even the last episode when we were like trying not to say it, it gets kind of clunky, but I think it's worth it to just like stumble through it. Like it's still better than saying buying and selling a person. Like even if you're like, yeah, they're going to sign or they're going to go over there or they're going to, put their signature on the contract for Juve, whatever you got to do is better than saying buying and selling Morata. But also, even if somebody was, let's say, somebody could listen to this and say, oh, you're virtue signaling or you're trying to be woke or whatever. It's not that, when I was looking up articles before we did the show, different big people in soccer have talked about the like modern day slavery in regards to the sport. Michel Platini, there was a big thing about third party ownership, which is also big. Was big in Brazil, but they like banned it in. I want to say they banned it in EPL or like some other leagues. Banned which they called it third party ownership. And Michel Platini, when he was head of UEFA, said that that's a form of slavery. Like some entity, quote unquote, owns a portion of a player. So when the transfer happens, like they get a fee from it. Like it's not like, now obviously Michel Platini wasn't talking about the terminology buying and selling players, but he's talking about something that's in the sport that needed to stop because it resembles slavery. Yeah. So that's just what we're saying. Like this terminology also resembles slavery, so let's stop it.
I mean, you kind of brought up earlier. I think for anybody who's listened to this and is kind of getting into the sport and doesn't understand that beginning learning block in the sport of soccer is understanding transfers, like understanding if you come from American sports, like why does he get 140 million? What's this 140 million? It's
I'm not really gonna lie to you. That was my first thought when I saw it.
It's very weird because I was like, dang, you just get a 100 million check. Is it?
Yo, I was ready to start taking all my cousins to soccer practice. Like, yo, y'all are practicing. Like, this is generational wealth
right now.
I was like, this is generational wealth.
Better start kicking it. No, yeah, it's the biggest confusing thing. I mean, I'll give an example. The David Alaba transfer from Real to Real Madrid, right? They paid for his services, or see, we're all fumbling around this word. The transfer was for I think 120 million. It was like It was like 80 million to the club, 6 million to his family. It was just very strange, the breakdown of the transfer. But the important thing is people to understand in Europe, what they pay attention to is the wages. Like they talk about how much his wages is. So they break down weekly. We say, oh, we'll very lightly in the United States talk about how much, like, let's say LeBron makes weekly, but here they talk about the 5-year figure number. They don't really use that number in Europe. They just talk about wages, but normally it's just the transfer number. So that's the hardest thing to understand and the strangest thing. And Platini's 100% right. It's very common. It was extremely common with South American players. It's still a little gray area. What they'll do now is they'll have outside companies help pay for player wages, but I think it's very weird too, because we don't get the clarity on how that works contractually. Like how does that work? What if he wants to leave? How does these things work? So it's very weird and gray, and there's not a lot of clarity on that, but yeah, that's a root issue there too. So there's a litany of issues in the sport when it comes to what these things that still attributed to a lot of slavery. Professional slavery is what the term we've used before, professional slavery. So starting off with already changing terminology, I think, and how you're addressing and talking about players and how you're discussing their transfers is a huge step towards making that real change, rather than just hugging each other and passing banners around saying no to racism. Like you need to make systematic changes within the sport, within media.
No, you're absolutely right. And I want to pick up on one thing you talked about how other terminology you use, because it's so frequently. I think we was talking about it before the show about like how players like Daryl DK are now being labeled as physical. They're not, he doesn't lack technical skill, and as I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to talk about how he is as a player, but it gets very tricky when you're talking about a person of color and you're just labeling him as physical. Or he just uses brunt force. Oh, he's not very technical. Or for the instance of, darn it, I just lost the point that we were talking about how they use a player wages when they first signed with the club. Like, oh, player A is making $50K a week. But then if player A doesn't live up to the astronomical, list of things they want that player to do, they'll use it in a way to be like, well, you're getting paid $50,000 a week. Why aren't you doing better? They'll try to use it against you, things like that. Can we just take a moment just to talk about like those two things? Because I think because that's something I've called out before as well, just challenging other big soccer personalities about just like, there's other ways to talk about players outside of pace and power, a technical and mindfulness. If you want to describe a player as pace and power, because there are players that have that pace and power, that's fine. But there's better ways how to describe that terminology.
This topic, especially like the pace and power thing, is like, sadly, like one of the reasons I got out of American football was because of how media would talk about players. I just found it to be so racist and ridiculous. And when I started watching soccer, I'm like, okay, nice. Like they're not going to do that over there, but they definitely do. and it's tough because, I think a lot of these personalities, the white ones, they just don't know. But I want to, this is an example of one of the worst ones that I heard, and we had talked about on the show whenever this was years ago. I remember one commentator was talking about Mbappe, and he mentioned his natural speed. And I was like, that's literally so racist, Like, this guy, like, and we have to talk about it on the show. I can't just like call the guy racist a bunch of times. I'm like, when you're a professional, you didn't get there with anything natural. You have to train. If Mbappe just sat around and ate pizza and stuff, he's not going to be fast. He has to train to be fast. There's nothing just like he just woke up. He's 11 years old and he's just faster than everybody. And he just stays faster than everybody no matter what. No, they're not running around at recess. These are professionals. So yeah, you have a lot of that. And to be honest with you, I don't know what you can do about that other than having diversity in media, and not just like independent media, but these bigger platforms. And these bigger platforms like bringing on people like us too to talk about things, because I feel like sometimes they're kind of like jaded and don't really care that much. We have like a lot more passion. I feel like the independent soccer people. So, they have a lot of work to do, and somebody correcting those people, like being like, "Hey, dude, like, what do you mean?" I remember when Balotelli goal that me and Caesar watched some years ago, and he did some beautiful move, and the woman on BN is just like, "Oh, look how strong he is." I'm like, there was no strength involved there. Like, but nobody's going to correct her. Nobody's going to think about it. So, like, then it's just over after that,
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I think what was the famous example this past year with Di Maria, with the commentator said his Latin temperament.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were just everyone was just like, wait, what?
Yeah, I feel like I talked about that in the show too. I think I said it before.
Caesar didn't care because he's from Argentina. He didn't care.
Well, Argentina's a little different. I mean, maybe he did. No, I'm playing. No, but just it starts with one of the big issues. Like, to change it is getting shows like Can I Kick It, We Made It podcast on those platforms, because I don't sit on the show and, like I've heard before, and talk about how Morata's a physical threat. I never said, "Oh man, look how physical Morata is." I've never said that like that. Maybe he's made a play where he had to get physical, but no, you give me a player with the same stature, like a Balotelli situation, they'll talk about how he's this physical player. When, to be honest with you, they're both very finesse, bigger players. They play a finesse style. They have good footwork. They play differently. So
just like the stretch four in basketball.
Exactly. Like, just because they're large and they're a black athlete, oh, he's physical and this and this. And we've, like you said, you've heard that before in football. I've heard that before in basketball consistently, when that's not the case. The natural born athleticism and this and this, that's cute when you're, doing the PE drills, but these are professionals. Like, you watch some of those trainings, like I've watched too many Real Madrid practice videos in my life. It's embarrassing, but you see the training drills they do for those uphill speed. These guys are working hard. So it's nothing about natural. Like, if you're not working hard, you're going to be last in that every single time. You're going to be looking like you've been eating donuts all the time, like Hazard. That's different. See, that's the situation. It's a little different around here. So that's how I think some of the change needs to come. Given opportunities for shows like ours to get more of a platform to speak, to be able to get a different perspective, even when I always enjoy seeing something different. My big issue with the soccer podcast medium is I don't really see a ton of that. I don't see. I mean, think about this. I love this sport. I'm subscribed to like one soccer podcast, and I don't even watch his other sports as much, and I have more subscriptions to those. Like, I'm listening to those more often. Like, that needs to change, I think, in a sport, especially in the United States, if we want to see, a big difference in this. And for 2017, we started the show, right? Years and years ago. Like, early on, we're talking about how MLS and US needs to make changes within our communities to bring different people to the platform, bring energy and diversity to the sport. Like, there needs to be so much done, and that all starts with you giving platforms like ours and shows like ours up to the forefront to be able to speak on this stuff.
No, you're right. And I mean, it's not being on top of what we're talking about, but it kind of is. Like, I feel like 2017 was that moment where soccer, people getting into the sport, like me, you guys, for instance, like, that's really like the real soccer media boom, if you want to put a label on it, because that's when, like, you guys got started. 2018 is when I started River City 93. You have For the Culture in Atlanta. You have Chop Soccer Pod out in New York. You have 2 Cents FC out in Atlanta. You have Shea Butter FC. Like, it's kind of like the black soccer media boom all happened. It is like all these diverse and unique perspectives. Because granted, like, and I think one of the most beautiful things about this area is that the way how I view the game in Virginia is going to be totally different how you guys view the game in LA. But I can appreciate that because of, like, you're bringing a different perspective to it. The way how you guys view it in LA is going to be totally different than people in Atlanta, things like that. So, but you're all right. Like, I think these media markets, these bigger media markets, need to do more of just hiring the same people and being like, well, talk about these topics, because we just saw the issue with the NWSL about how they just hired like a whole diversity education force. And what was it? Like 10 of the people on that list were white males. One was a black guy. 4 of them were like Trump supporters. And they were like, hey guys, diversity and inclusion, here you go. And everyone's just like, you do realize like 60% of your league is black or international. So a large portion of your player base or fan base either has family members or identifies as of the LGBTQ plus community. And you go out here and hire a whole bunch of white guys, older white guys. Like it's just mind blowing, It's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
I think that there's not enough pressure on these people, but also I feel like especially when it comes to American media, like they just look at like it's all a monopoly kind of. They're like we're gonna be here no matter what. Like we would always say that about MLS. Like since there's no promotion relegation, like there's not much pressure on these teams. Whatever. We'll just start a new team. Like it's just it's a monopoly at the end of the day. So like. I remember a few years ago, LA Galaxy finished like last in their conference, and it's just like, oh, we'll just buy Zlatan. We'll have. See, I did it. We'll have Zlatan sign with us. See, damn it,
sliding. You got Zlatan sliding over here now. Damn.
So yeah, like it's I don't know. It's tough. Like you see a lot of. It's hard to say whether soccer is growing in America or not, because sometimes I feel like it is and sometimes I feel like it isn't. Like there's been times where I felt like it was, then then the men's national team didn't make the World Cup and I felt like it was just like kind of stagnant a little bit. But then you see then I started to like notice more like black soccer media and stuff. And I'm like, oh wow, I think for us, and I was telling Caesar this too, I think for us, like, there's kind of a disconnect because a lot of you guys are in the South or on the East Coast, and we're in California where there isn't a whole lot of like black soccer stuff. It's mostly like the Hispanic community, and then like rich white kids. So
don't worry, it happens here in the South. It happens here to us. Okay. We just happen to be loud about it. Just be like, hey, look, we're here. What's up? Yeah. No, but I get what I get what you're saying though.
Like, okay, I want to ask you: do you feel like since 2018, like, do you feel like soccer is growing? Like the population of soccer fans is growing in America?
I will say this: I think people are being more aware of the sport because before, I'll use my parents as an example. My dad is hardcore NFL; like he bleeds Giants blue. He from Bronx, like he walks out the house, nothing else, Giants. And the only time people watch soccer would be the World Cup. But now my dad is calling me, asking me about, oh, what are the Richmond Kickers doing? Are they on TV this weekend? Oh, I'm watching DC United. And I think another thing about it is just the accessibility of the sport has also grown. Because before, like you remember, like if you didn't have what was it? Fox Soccer Pass or ESPN. What was it? It wasn't ESPN News, was it? It was ESPN. Yeah,
Champions League used to come on ESPN.
Yeah. But I mean, once again, like you had to like set time out your day to watch it. It wasn't like you could go back and rewatch the match. It's just the accessibility of the sport has grown more because now it's like I remember watching Richmond Kickers games on YouTube, and now they just signed a deal to have their games being watched over in Italy. So if you're in Italy, because USL just signed a deal with One Football to have their games broadcast over there in Italy, and they're trying to branch out to other people. Like they just signed a deal with Italy and Brazil, but it's just the accessibility of the sport has gotten so bigger. Yeah, But then also with that, you also have a bunch of people that know nothing about the sport, just giving you blatant bad hot takes.
I also feel like we do have a lot of like MAGA people and incels in American soccer too. Like, like every year I know like when MLS will do their like Black History Month panel or they do like Pride Month stuff, like MLS will do it and I'll look on the YouTube video and like them comments are wild. Uh, we got a lot of those. I mean, we also have some in the men's national team, so that's what makes it worse too. So.
Mm-hmm.
What? I actually think what's funny is, me and Bam on the show regularly argued about the growth of soccer in America and whether it has or not, or if it's growing. And I have my point why I felt like it is, and he hasn't. I think what I can say, I think there's more investment in exposure of the sport and showing the sport. There's more investment more than ever to broadcast the sport in this country. I'll say that for sure. You can't dispute that. Now, from my viewpoint in Southern California, do I think that soccer signups increased? No, I don't think youth signup was a massive issue. Youth signup has always been very consistent here across all demographics. It's a big part of here. I know friends from all backgrounds that have all played soccer when they're young. Are we retaining some of these talents in the later years, right? In high school, what are they choosing? And in that fall, in our winter sports, we know what our winter sports are. They're the big hitters. There's basketball here and there's football. Are they going to make that decision to play soccer? Are they doing that? Or what's going on here? In college, what are they doing? So that is where we're kind of seeing what's the pipeline like after that. We have some players like Pulisic who were blessed enough to go to IMG Florida and then go to BAVB. Is the same path for Daryl Dyke you just mentioned? No, obviously he went to collegiate soccer and did his own path and moved a different way, right? He played for Orlando City, now he's at Barnsley. So it's these different paths we're seeing. I think if I'm a young soccer player, if I'm a young black soccer player in America right now, it's still gray area on what the path is to get, to professional. It's still weird. It's still not clear, right? Like MLS Super Draft, homegrown Adidas talent game. You need to, the more exposure we get in this sport, they keep these contracts going and not flip into a bunch of different channels. Maybe people will get to learn more about how the road is from maybe USL Pro, which we used to be, to now with the NASL, all these different divisions. Maybe we'll learn more on how that process is, because with NBA and NFL, it's very clear, right? You get your 1 year collegiate for basketball or overseas, and boom, you're eligible for the draft. It's very clear for everybody. Almost like probably 80% of Americans know the path. But for soccer, can we say the same? No. And I think until we know that path, then the parents can tell their kids, and then we can just move forward from there. It needs to be really clear on understanding, how can I become a professional? How can my child become a professional? We all know how to sign up for AYSO, but do we know how they can translation to making real money dollars? Because I didn't know as a kid really in America. So I wonder if they do know, or they're going to learn.
No, I think that's a fair point. Because I think on one of our earlier podcasts, me and my other co-host Shanair, we were talking about it and just how for African Americans in this country, the go-to sports are always going to be football and basketball. And the reason why is it just all comes back to what's available to us. What's the easier thing? Because I know I can go to football, and if I play 3-4 years, get drafted, even if I'm a 6th-round draft pick, I'm still bringing home $100,000 check. That's instant money. That's, it's generational. I can get my mama out the hood, basketball. I can play 1-2 years in college basketball, or I can go to the G League and play a year or two and get drafted and get signed and bring home a $2 million contract and get my family out the hood. Soccer is a lot more. They want to display it as grind, and you got to, work your way up the ladder. But like you said, it's like limited opportunities. It is limited opportunities in the space of, it's the famous saying, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. Because if your coach has connections to a very talented club team or youth club team, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be looking at a better pool of coaches versus if my coach is just a football coach that was just like, oh, we're going to have you coach soccer in the spring. It's very different. But, oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm saying you make a great point, because out of all those sports you named, like I played basketball. Like if I didn't have money to play, which basketball honestly was really affordable for me. It was affordable for my family. My mom put me in club soccer because I played a lot of youth soccer, and I got bored of it. She's like, why don't we try to see how much club is? Went to club team. They give us an astronomical number. Mom was like, what? No, we'll just put you back in basketball, because our coach used to say, well, here, if you can't pay for this, we'll do the candy bar drive. We'll just have you do that and you'll raise the funds to be able to play, or we'll find a sponsor. It's that simple. Like, no matter what, I was going to be able to play. Soccer, it was like, no, like, this is the fee. If you can't afford it, kick rocks. Like, oh, okay. Like, all right. And one of the examples I used to talk about is one of my favorite players when I was coming up, like you watching soccer. I used to love watching Eddie Johnson. I was one of my favorite players to watch. I thought he was the best. He had so much talent because I watched so much soccer. I watched so much Brazilian soccer, so much European soccer. This was the first American talent I've seen that was like, this guy could play anywhere. Like, this is the first time I've seen something like this. Of course, Landon Donovan too, but this is the first time I've seen like a black player that I feel like could play anywhere in the world. And I was watching him play, and I remember he was telling a story for MLS saying that he played for one of the biggest club teams in South Florida, and he got sponsored to play. And the parents went crazy. The parents were like, that's not fair. What? Like, the obstacles I'm sure he had to endure are probably still prevalent today, and that needs to change. We've had this discussion before. That wage gap and the affordability of sport needs to completely change if we're going to see even more diversity, which is needed in this sport and along the fans and media.
Yeah, that's very true. And the point you said, like how soccer has grown in this country, I think is one of the things where I was mentioning to my wife the other day about how we're not going to see the benefits of how much soccer has grown, because if you really look at U.S. soccer as a totality, it's still in its baby phases. Like, if you really think about it, my club team, the Richmond Kickers, are 30 years old. And I want to say U.S. soccer maybe itself is maybe 35 years old, maybe 40, give or take. And you look at the other countries like Italy, England, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, they got 60-year head start on us. So it's like, as much as we like, I know what you're saying, Bear sees about like, dang, is sport really growing? Like, is all we doing is worth it? Like, it is, because if 40, 50 years time, we're all old and gray and having walking canes and whatnot, like, who knows what this sport's going to be in? But the point we're talking about, I want to tie it into this part. I want to ask you guys this. Do you guys think, and you talking about slave terminology, do you guys think players' nationalities have an impact on how much, they sign with the team for? Because one of the things that we did a podcast on the history of the 2018 French national team. I call this team, it's the World Cup for Africa, because 75% of that team has roots to Africa. But players like Kylian Mbappe, they can sign for Real Madrid for an astronomical fee, right? Because he's French. He's a French international. But if Kylian Mbappe is Cameroon or Algerian, that number didn't get reduced, Because, and I'll use a player like this, for example. That's my dog. She's excited. What's his name? He was with Chelsea. He was about to sign for Bayern. His name is escaping me right now, but he just said that he was switching his international from England to Ghana.
Is it Hudson-Odoi?
Yes, Hudson-Odoi. But if you go, I think it's on Transfermarkt, like his transfer fee. I can't think of a better way how to explain it, so I apologize. But his transfer fee, it dropped like almost $3-4 million after he made the switch.
Yeah,
that's insane, right?
It's crazy, but I think that's also a product of just obviously the European national teams are just bigger. Like, they get more visibility. The media they have more money to show these national teams around the world. Like, I mean, you get a team like Brazil. Like, Brazil's the most popular team in most countries, no matter what. Like, everybody's going to be watching the Euros around the world. Honestly, they probably watch the Euros more, or they probably watch the Euros more in Africa than the AFCON tournament. They probably do, because the best players, the biggest players are there. I'm not saying that's right, but like, it makes sense. But what could change that is if like African teams, or maybe like Asian teams, like teams in the AFC, like start doing better in like the World Cup. And that'll also take like Like what year was that when the Ghana players kind of like went on strike and was that 2014 or 10? No,
I want to say 14. I want to say it was the 14. It was right around the 14-ish World Cup. Yeah, it was right around that World Cup.
Yeah, you like there's a lot of stuff that goes on in international soccer. We saw a lot of stuff in Haiti recently in regards to that. Yeah, I mean, it sucks that his transfer value would go down from just switching his nationality, but I'm not surprised at all. Like it's a business at the end of the day. These people have no like those people that are dealing with the money, like that's all they care about.
If you're asking our players essentially market value and value to teams treated differently when they do that, absolutely. Two things. Number one, he switches from being a Euro slot on a team to a non-EU player, which can be affected as well too. So those are important. So non-EU players, they have to pay more for because it's an expensive player to have on the team, right? Like they have to pay for a slot, all this stuff, and that goes into the nitty-gritty. I mean, I'll give a great example of a player who I feel like who honestly should have got even more love who didn't. Samuel Eto'o. Samuel Eto'o is one of the most outstanding strikers in history. His best season at Barcelona was his last season. He scored 30 league goals in his last season and was transferred out. It wasn't like there was a decline. He was out.
When we did the episode on Samuel Eto'o, like growing up, I realized Samuel Eto'o at Inter. I didn't know he was at Barcelona. So when we did the episode on him, and I was telling my co-host Shanir, I was like, yo, you mean to tell me this guy literally put up like
monster
30,
numbers,
10 and 10 year? He got traded? He got let go for what? All because Pep wanted Zlatan. And I'm like,
he just wanted to win another league title for no reason. Not win a Champions League. And Eto'o went to Inter and won there too, by the way. So
which is crazy because they have
how that works.
It's crazy.
I mean, he's a great ambassador for. He talked about his time in Mallorca. He talked about his time in Spain and how he felt he was treated and how things have went. And he spent many years in Spain. And, we saw the value. He's one of those players where he was like, I think 32 or 31 at Chelsea, and they were already talking about him being an old man. So when he scored 16 or 17 goals, he used to celebrate with the walking cane as a joke, like, oh yeah, I'm an old man, right? Like, so we know what it is, especially this. I didn't actually know that about Hudson-Odoi. Switching over, I know that was a little bit of a similar situation with God, what's the Crystal Palace player? I forgot his name. He was was a youth international for England, and he switched to play for Ivory Coast. It happens. I wonder if it's maybe a playing time thing. I mean, I know Hadoi's probably looking at the England team and is like, yo, there's a lot of really good wingers there. Jesus. So maybe he's like, I got to make, a career decision.
It has
here.
to be like a playing time thing. But then also,
they got Sancho and Rashford. Like, it's going to be a bit.
I will say, I don't know Hudson-Odoi, but I imagine seeing the comments that were made at Rashford, Sancho, and Saka, and he was just like, I don't want to deal with that, man. Like
he's gonna deal with it. He's gonna deal with all that stuff regardless. Like if
he's at Chelsea, like
he's playing. He's playing in Europe, and he has Instagram. Like you're gonna get racist comments all the time. But I mean, it'll like even with him, like when we'll start to see those changes when it's like the really good players that are like, no, I'm going to play in Africa. And like, and it's like players that like have like, let's say if Kylian Mbappe was like, when he was still at Monaco and it's like, no, I'm going to play for Cameroon or I'm going to play for Algeria. Like that would have been a big deal. That's a player that you still have to pay attention to, but I mean, a lot of these European players, like, I can't really blame them. If you grew up in France, whatever, like, I'm not saying like, okay, you got to go play for like Pogba's family's from like
Guinea. No, not Guinea.
Yeah. It's a small country. I can't remember, but I'm not mad at him necessarily. He grew up in France. Like, you're gonna go want to play with your friends. We're not gonna bring up what Caesar said about
hey. Yeah, they're Guinea. Yeah, they're from Guinea.
Yeah, okay. But it's unfortunate that his transfer value would go down, but I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah. And see, like also me being a Reggae Boys fan, like players like it's great because I know I'm seeing players like Leon Bailey and Michael Antonio and all these other England guys come over. It's great, but then there's also it's like that part of my head is like yo, you England calls you up. I know you're not coming to Jamaica. I know you're not. And the only reason you're coming to us now is because England didn't want you. Not like Leon Bailey. Leon Bailey wanted to play with Jamaica, but like Michael Antonio, he could have been played with Jamaica, but he kept holding out for England. Andre Gray, Varel Morrison. It's things like that kind of make you like, and then it also makes you think about like how much money on the table is being left when players make that switch.
I was just going to say that too. Like these players are also they're looking out for themselves and their families. Like they know that it's going to be like their careers can be very short. Their careers are short, but it could be cut short at any time. So they're probably thinking like, I got to make the most out of this while I can. So like Raheem Sterling's like, look, dude, like that's cool over there.
A good one.
Yeah, like the guy who mentioned it, but it's the famous scenario of would you rather be the player on Duke or the starter at NC State? Like, which one's gonna get you drafted more?
I'm not gonna let you come at the Reggae Boys like that, calling them NC State. I'm offended by that.
Look, I'm partial Jamaican, so I'm not calling us NC State. I'm just saying, like, it's that thing.
They were a 5th place Copa America team. They finished 5th place Copa America. Give them some respect, please. They got invited to Copa America and balled out.
Because this man. I'm still pissed at Whitmore because he decided, like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna play Leon Bailey all during the group stage, and then we play against America. He's like, yeah, Bailey, just sit here. Like, at least put him on 30 minutes.
He just transferred, right?
Yeah, to Aston Villa.
Try to get that paper. Get that paper. I mean, he was at Leverkusen. I mean, honestly, like, he might as well go to England, big dog.
Yeah, but I mean, I would think I don't really.
Well, he's good. Yeah, he's good. They paid good money for him, actually.
They paid a transfer fee. Yeah, there we go.
For his services. This is a rough one.
Oh man, you know what, yo? It's been a blast talking to you guys, man. Anything else before we wrap up? Because I really feel like this conversation can go on for hours. And like as you can tell, like we broke it off talking about the Jamaican national team, and it can go all kinds of ways. But this is like a great conversation, guys.
Yeah,
any last going back, from you guys.
Going back to like the slave terminology thing. I can imagine somebody seeing that. It sounds harsh, like whoa, like you're bringing up something really serious in regards to the sport. But I just want to reiterate that, like. Going like even people like Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini, like these people like talked about that word slavery in regards to different aspects of the sport. So it's not untenable to talk about that terminology in regards to the sport. I do think it's important. It would be great if it's something that could change because it does have a legacy in like all these countries, and a bad legacy. And we're going to do our best. As you can see, it is difficult. We're going to slip up, but we're going to do our best. And also, we're not trying to say like everybody got to do it. We're not putting any pressure on anybody, but we're going to try to not use slavery terminology because Caesar's people did suffer another 23 years on top of it. I mean, it was like 50 years on top of Mexico. So like, because actually, let me not make any jokes. Go ahead.
Yeah, come on, man. You just okay. You know what? He's ruined it. I'll say.
No. Let me say where you come from because as a history major, my professor used to tell me all the time. He was like, history is one of those things where you can make all kinds of jokes about it, and 9 times out of 10, it's rooted in truth.
Well, I'll save the show before he gets us canceled on the show where we're trying to stop canceling of everything. So I'll save the show. I think that the important thing is to note is that, of course, we're all humans here. And I think that our approach to the show is that we're not like, if you think that we're like this pitchfork and show, or we're just coming after people for saying this stuff, that's not the approach, because at the same time, we like to make a lot of light of things that were very serious and damaging to history, to life. We make light of it because at the end of the day, like you said, it's something that had a big part of a lot of where we are today. We make light of it to deliver the messages saying that, hey, it's all good. I know it's not necessarily your fault you've been saying like this, that I've said like this a few times on the show, but as long as you're making a conscious effort to know that saying that, if it makes you feel weird, you can make a conscious effort to change that, because that's where it all begins. And I say it every time, and I've said it 4 times on the show, it's not enough to do the banner stuff. It's what we're doing deeply embedded in these shows and the culture. We need to make changes. We need to make actual changes when it's even coming to terminology. And I think that that's the stance we're going to take, and there'll be more that we'll take in moving forward.
Most definitely, man. You guys have been amazing. And once again, I'm mad at myself because I should have had you guys on earlier.
Nah, man, we appreciate coming on, man. Absolutely.
Okay. And next time we'll link up, and then we can have a debate if Ronaldo's black or not.
No, if Ronaldo's African or not. If he's
I'm sorry. If he's African, he's African. I'm looking at that map. After this, go look at the map, but look at the distance between the island from Africa and Portugal, and then we'll debate it.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I think he does have ties. I think there is some Africanism in there. There's some ties in there, because you look like Eusebio came from the island right off of Africa. It's escaping my mind right now, but it started with an M. And he was able to play for Portugal because that was
from Madeira.
Yes. No, Eusebio was from Mozambique, I think.
Mozambique, yeah. And
he was in Mozambique, and he was a Portuguese national. Yeah,
he was a Portuguese national. And then you look at the island where Cristiano Ronaldo come from.
Mighty close to Africa, sir. Mighty close.
Look, if we know anything about Portugal, we know they'll do 2 things. They'll start a slave trade, and you can get some fine sailors from Portugal. So it's not hard to say. It's not hard to say.
Ronaldo, I drafted you years ago, but we can have the debate later.
I'm here to say Ronaldo's more African than Caesar. So
absolutely.
Oh man, yo, where can everyone?
Distance-wise, he dominates all of us sitting here.
Hold on. I'm here to say Ronaldo's more African than Elliot. How about that?
Oh man.
Okay, now we're never coming back. Good job. Good job. We're never coming back on the show.
Oh man, yo, where can everyone reach you guys at, man? Like, where can everyone reach out to you guys at?
Just go to WeMadeItPodcast.com or follow us. We Made It Podcast on Twitter. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're on Twitter being ridiculous. We did have a Twitter before. I messed up and got it taken away. So we came back. But yeah, WeMadeItPodcast.com, and We Made It Podcast on Twitter.
Yeah.
Well, as always,
appreciate you having us. Really appreciate it.
Look, I thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy days. As always, listeners, we just want to say thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to listen to the podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at CIKIFC on Twitter, also on YouTube as well. As always, we'll see you guys next time. We'll holler at you later. Be safe and be easy.